The King of Bhutan broke this century-old tradition just for his beloved wife. Each country has its customs and traditions which have been practiced for a long time. These were followed perfectly and accurately during the old days, especially by the royal families who were the royals. But now things have changed. Even the royal families do not follow them. One such example is the King and Queen of Bhutan. They married in 2011 and are now known as the Kate and William of the West. We will see how the King of Bhutan broke this centuries-old tradition just for his beloved wife. Royal families of Bhutan are well known for polygamy. Do you think that the King Jigme Khesar Namgyel Wangchuk of Bhutan practiced this, or did he live in the same place with his wife? We know that you're just as curious as we are, so welcome back to Best Royal Affairs. Like the video and subscribe to our channel for more interesting content. Bhutan, also known as the Land of Thunder Dragons, is a country located in Asia between India and China. They are known for practicing constitutional monarchy. Vajrayana Buddhism is their state of religion. From various findings, it has been established that Bhutan was inhabited in early 2000 BC. The country has less than 1 million people. As said earlier, their country is known for the practice of polygamy, especially in royal families. The fourth king of Bhutan, Jigme Singye Wangchuk, father of the present king, married 4 women at once in 1979, and the surprising fact is that they are sisters. This marriage was accepted as valid under both state and religious law as per the regulations of the Kingdom of Bhutan. A man automatically marries a woman's sister when he weds her. 5 sons and 5 daughters were born to the king's 4 wives, totaling 10 children. But Jigme Khesar was against this custom and proved this by marrying the love of his life, Jetsunpi Ma, who have 2 sisters. She came from a normal family and became the youngest queen consort in the world. At the time of the wedding, the queen was only 21 and the king was only 31, which means that they have an age gap of 10 whole years. They have 2 children with each other and frequently go to significant events together. Bhutan views their partnership as odd due to some of their actions. So why do you think their actions are odd? King Jigme Khesar is an individual who challenges conventional wisdom. He married on what many consider to be an unlucky day, which makes this obvious. Many people in the country, where stories of enigmatic spirits, both good and evil, abound, think that when a king is born, a demon also comes along. The outcome is a never-ending conflict between good and evil. Many believe that the king was sending a message that he would triumph over evil by giving such joy to the people by picking this day when the demon seemed to be at its fiercest. Many years ago, the future king of Bhutan and his future wife had their first meeting. He was 17 years old at the time, while Jetsunpi Ma was only just 7 years old. Many of the king's friends were invited to a royal celebration where they met. When the prince spotted the girl, he made a jest about how he would marry her someday. Nobody was serious about it since no one could come up with a connection between them. Everyone soon moved on from this incident. The prince travelled abroad to attend colleges in the UK and the USA. At Oxford, he successfully defended his political science dissertation. At that time, his future wife had also completed a quality education. She first studied in India before earning a degree in international religions from London's Regent's College. Soon after this, he proposed to her and then he married her. In front of everyone, King Jigme broke a long-standing custom by kissing the bride on the lips during their wedding. Jigme was the first king in Bhutan's history to do such a thing out in the open. Well, that clearly shows how his perspectives are different from previous rulers, and in a country like Bhutan where PDA is strictly prohibited, it certainly shows how much he loved her. Bhutan, known for its high gross national happiness quotient, is a country where happiness is always present. The Punakha Dzong, also known as the Palace of Great Happiness, served as the wedding's historic venue. However, in a country that is fundamentally the quietest one, the happiness is not immediately evident. As the king had wished, the festivities were calm, polite, spiritual, and low-key during their wedding. The wedding was officiated by Bhutan's highest cleric, who presided over a purification ritual in front of a 100-foot tapestry depicting Zabdrung, the country's founding monk king from the 17th century. The extravagant traditional ceremony became the biggest media event in Bhutan's history when it aired on state television and around the globe. 3 days of national wedding festivals were held to commemorate the wedding throughout the entire nation. The monarch serves as a link between Bhutan's closely guarded traditional traditions and the nation's fast-growing younger generation thanks to his youth and global experience. He has come to represent harmony and stability in a nation that is undergoing a profound transformation, which is why the royal wedding has taken on such a symbolic significance here. In contrast to his father, the young king holds infants and displays obvious embarrassment at how people avoid looking at his face. He embraces them, smiles for the camera, and makes a lot of cross-country trips to see them. When he was surrounded by female admirers whilst traveling to Thailand, his good looks earned him the title Prince Charming. The everlasting nickname of People's King has been bestowed upon him due to his own personality. He held his wife's hand while she mingled with the crowd during the post-wedding festivities. At first, she seemed tentative, but after a while she appeared to gain confidence. They embarked on a national tour and engaged in social activities right after their wedding. The young queen frequently makes trips to the kindergartens, hospitals, and other schools. A long-standing custom dictates that the monarch and queen should keep their distance from one another in public. In any case, Jigme keeps Jetsun by the hand and doesn't leave her. He frequently compliments her and describes her as a kind and wise person. This young wife has quickly gained notoriety as a style icon for her traditional attire and modern styling thanks to her stunning beauty and beautiful sense of style. She is frequently spotted wearing stunning, vividly colored Bhutanese clothing, which has been captured the attention of the entire world. She is the modern-day Jackie Kennedy or Princess Diana of Asia, owing to the gold silks and highly embroidered patterns that she wears. Although she prefers to wear locally made Bhutanese clothing, she is equally stylish when dressed in Western clothing. The Bhutanese beauty stunned the British audience while she was there with her sleek, sophisticated attire and timeless good looks. With their kids, Bhutan's monarch and queen tour the villages of the nation. They also have Instagram accounts and openly share details of their lives on social media. It's quite difficult to comprehend that this nation did not have any television 20 years ago. Many of the rigorous regulations in his state were ignored by the king. Although they may live their lives in privacy, the modern royal couples prefer to live in a humble home where they frequently welcome neighbors over for a cup of tea and a talk. The King and the Queen of Bhutan are frequently compared to another contemporary royal couple, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, who also got married in 2011. Both couples enjoy an easy royal life between their official obligations and royal business. The 5th Druk Gyalpo, or Dragon King, is a constitutional king unlike his authoritarian father. He makes a concerted effort to remain away from politics, but his influence is nevertheless felt strongly in a nation that has historically turned to the monarchy for leadership. Having the king's ear is still an important resource for the people of modern-day Bhutan, with a staff of secretaries from the Royal Chamberlain's office taking precise notes for any follow-up. This is not a reproduction of the Western form of democracy, neither is it a commemoration of the past, the king's press secretary Dorji Wanchuk said. However, it's a sincere attempt to look at how Western democratic standards might be merged with traditional administrative structures where the king and the government are seen as being more compassionate and serving the needs of the populace. In Bhutan, not a single person will speak out against the monarchy, and we know why. Some of them even openly told that, with the monarchy in place, we did not have to choose between one party or the other. But we should accept that both monarchy and democracy have their positives and negatives. So that's all for today. Do you support the king in reforming the nation? Are these traditions to be preserved or avoided? Do let us know in the comment section below about your opinions. Also, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel, and for more such videos such as this one, check out our YouTube channel. Thank you so much for watching this video and for staying to the end. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next video.